Welcome back. This is Microsoft Virtual Academy getting started with Template 10. We're talking about the view services that ship inside the library. There are 4, and right now we're going to be talking about the navigation service, a very core service to Template 10.
Especially if you want to navigate.
Especially if you want to navigate, and most apps, I guess unless you're making calculator, you want to navigate. Yeah.
Seems likely.
There's no reason to write the app calculator since there is one.
Indeed.
Yeah, unless you're just not
there's
happy with
probably
the map.
327 in the App Store.
The calculator app. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Next to the fart apps. All right, terrific. So let's talk about the navigation service and what it gives you. So let's start with where it comes from. You get it for free when you start your application. The bootstrapper will create one for you. You can override that and create your own, but if you don't, and most apps won't, you get it for free and you get a navigation service that wraps a frame and handles all the navigation inside that frame. So if you're accustomed to navigating frame.navigate, then you're going to be very happy with the way navigation service works because it does the same thing.
Yeah, the primary difference between the navigation service and the frame is generally you would access the frame from within the context of a page code behind.
Yes.
Whereas navigation service is something that's available to you pervasively throughout your application, in your view model and so on and so forth, not only constrained to just the code behind.
That's right. One of the things you can't do inside a frame.navigate is ensure that you can actually restore from your navigation state. So what I mean is you might navigate to a page and pass to that page some sort of class, in-memory class, that can't be serialized. And then your application is suspended and then resumed, and it can't restore because it couldn't serialize that for you. Well, inside our navigation service, it automatically serializes it. It actually gives you an exception if you try to pass a non-serializable object. So that's very important because if we didn't do that, then you would have unexpected behavior around not being able to suspend. And so now that's all handled for you as well. Perhaps the most important thing that the navigation service does for you is it calls the exact overrides that you would have expected in your page code behind. So for example, I pass a parameter. Well, how do you receive that parameter? Well, in the standard frame.navigate, you would receive it in the onNavigated2 override in your page code behind, or your implicit code for your XAML. But that's not convenient for developers using design patterns like MVVM. Mm-hmm. It's more important that that parameter be passed to the view model. And so the navigation service does that, and it does it with its companion iNavigable. And so we have iNavigable. It's an implementation, or it's an interface that we use to implement our view models. And we'll talk a lot about the view model base in our MVVM session, but at its heart, it is so that you have onNavigated to, onNavigated from, and onNavigating from. And so those 3 are what you get for free inside it, and the navigation service kind of boils that up for you.
And the other great thing about it is it also exposes out dispatcher. So if you looked at the previous
that's right.
session where we talked about the dispatcher wrapper, this is where you can access your dispatcher. So this is, again, a guarantee that this is going to be available to you as you're moving around inside your applications.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it also adds some things that are just missing. For example, as you navigate forward and back inside the regular XAML frame, you'll actually get an exception if you're not allowed to do it. And so you'll naturally wrap those as, if I can go back, then go back. Well, why would you need to do that? If you ask for it, it should return true or false whether or not it did. And so that's what it does now. So you can call go forward and go back without that extra check. Seems trivial, but it's nice to have that sort of shortcut. Another one that it has that isn't part of the XAML frame is refresh, and it allows me to take an existing page and completely reload it. And so that's very valuable for a couple of reasons. One, because we don't have dynamic resources. If you change a static resource's value, it won't reapply until it's re-rendered. The easiest way to do that is just call .refresh and everything happens without polluting your forward and back stack. And so that forward and back stack is kind of like a browser. When you go back and forward along, you don't want to have, every time you refresh, it just adds to another. It doesn't. So that's another nice feature of the navigation service.
Yeah, another nice thing that iNavigable gives you, I'll say that again with my proper teeth. Yeah. iNavigable is session state. You can get access to session state, which is another nice affordance, I think, within the framework.
That's right. And so session state, if you're an ASP.NET developer, then you already know what session state is, right? That is that thing that's in memory until your application is reset. That's exactly the way it works for us as well. It's in memory, so you can pass objects around that aren't serializable. And so if you're trying to pass a parameter, but you're not able to because it's not serializable, you can put it in session state and then pass the key to the page. And then that page can have the logic to check to make sure that that key is actually in the session state. So there's a lot of good value there. Operates exactly like ASP.NET Session State in that it vanishes whenever your application is closed. That includes suspension termination. So as soon as your application is closed, either by the user or by the platform, it goes away. And so you would have the logic to check to make sure it's there and not just assume that it's there. But that's why navigation state is there. There's also page state, which I think we now call suspension state. And so whenever your application is about to suspend, we pass a dictionary to you saying, anything you want to keep till next time, and you put it in there, we store that away, and the next time your application is resumed from termination, we provide this back to you, and you can kind of fill in all the property values of your view model with that. And so there's really two there, session state, which is really just an in-memory dictionary to hold things. And we also have page or suspension state, what we used to call page state, that is there between suspension operations. So again, it's not there any other time. So that dictionary is intended for when you're suspending, you write your values out. If you don't get terminated, then that value won't be reused because you won't get resumed from termination and won't be passed back to you. So that's what it does.
That's good. So why don't we show a little bit of a demo about how
let me pull up. I have Visual
navigate
Studio up right now. And so let me just show you the base implementation, the basic implementation. So here's my bootstrapper, right? And I have a very simple, just on started, nothing going on. And I'm calling my navigation service, which is a property of the bootstrapper. Again, I can have more than one navigation service. This is returning to me the first navigation service created. So if I need to navigate a second frame or a second view that I may have created, it's up to me to go find that navigation service. But again, either for the majority of users, there's only going to be one navigation service. So I can say .navigate, and I can pass one of two things in. I can pass either a type, or I could pass an enumerator. Enumerable?
an enumeration of page keys.
An enumeration, yes. I could pass an enumeration. That's right. I knew we'd get it eventually. And so that's in case you don't have reference to these types, you can create an abstract representation of them instead and feed that into Bootstrapper. And so you're saying to the Bootstrapper, every time I want to go to main page, I'm going to pass you this enum of main page. You translate that back to the type of main page. This allows me to decouple my view models from my actual views. A lot of developers like doing that. Some developers don't care. For the developers who don't care, they can follow this standard implementation or use page keys is what we call that. Yeah. So the second piece I could pass to that is the parameter. And so here I can say I'm passing, let's say Darren May is sitting next to me. So I'll pass Darren May's value in so I could look up a record for Darren May.
So a lot of people might ask, they probably saw the signature there that the parameter is an object. And we've gone backwards and forwards through the life cycle of template 10 in terms of trying to come up with ways of making it possible to pass strongly typed values and so on. And we've always come back to the fact that you can never guarantee exactly what's going to be passed in.
That's right.
Based upon your application scenarios. You might have different launch scenarios where you're being launched through search, and you have a different parameter you're going to pass in to your application when you navigate during search than you would if you were navigating during a detail-based navigation. And so we've constantly returned back to the only way we can cater for this is by leaving it with the default object being passed.
The one constraint around that is no matter what I pass in, it must be deserializable or serializable, either one. It has to be both.
Well,
right?
yeah. One without the other is not much use.
Now, you might think that that detaches it from its memory, but it doesn't. So even though I'm serializing it, what I'm passing into the view model is the actual object in its original memory. And so you still get to interact with it. We've just serialized it for you. If you find that that would be problematic, you just pass a key and you use the session state. Yeah. So there was a third property or argument here that we haven't mentioned yet, and that's the info override. And that is when I navigate to a page, there's a transition animation that occurs. By default, it's the entrance animation. Template 10 applies that automatically for you if you don't do anything. If you don't like that and you want to use, I think there's one called drill in. It's very cool looking. You can implement that here and you can have all the custom animations you want. So that's really nice. That's really nice. We're not going to do that. I just want to pass Darren May. So if we were using a standard...
I just hate how that sounds.
It's so painful. Oh, my goodness. How about, let's pass the test. How about that? It's far less awful. All right, so now we're navigating to main page view model. If we were using a standard frame navigate, we would go to the view, so that's the main page right here, and we would drop to the code behind of this view, and we would override on navigated to, which has e, when we would say like var x equal e dot parameter, let's just say. And so then that's how we would get the test that we just passed, and I would have to cast it into a string, right, like this. And so this is a nice way to do it because you get it to the page, but most of our logic is going to be in our view model. We don't want to do it this way.
And so, you know, if you were doing this without a framework such as this, then you would need to find a reference to your view model. You'd then need to call a method or set a property on your view model from the code behind, so you'd be manually creating the glue.
That's right.
What we're doing in template 10 is doing that for you at a framework level, so you don't have to do it in every single page that you create.
And what it creates for you is a reliable pipeline for your view model, so you know when things are executed. In fact, the navigation service in template 10 executes your view model before it executes your page, which is a heck of a deal because it means your code could be ready when your page is actually rendering. It doesn't rely on it because it continues on, but it allows you to have that kind of jump start on it. Okay, so this main page, we're not going to do it this way. This main page also has a main page view model. It's blank right here, but I have overrides here as well because I'm using the view model base.
Which
view model base implements
navigable.
navigable, that's right. And so I could say things like override on navigated to, just like I did before. And so
now the interesting thing here is it's on navigated to async.
Async, that's exactly right. So I can do operations here that I couldn't do before without adding a async void, right? So not just because we don't like async voids, which aren't necessarily always wrong, but it also makes the pipeline unreliable again because we don't know what comes next or if we're there in time.
I mean, a quick aside, async voids were fundamentally created to support the event handlers, which are all returning voids. And so, you know, try and avoid that if you can in your own code.
Avoid void.
Avoid voids or async voids.
Yes, that's right. No, yeah, voids are right. Yeah, okay. So now, like before, I have the parameter here as well. And so if I could do the same thing, var x equals parameter as string, I've done exactly the same thing, only now I've got it inside my view model at a good time when I can do async calls if I want to, at a reliable pipeline all the way through. Don't have to create some sort of artificial link between my page and my view model. So it's really nice. The two other things that are passed to me are the mode. That's the way that I was brought in. So I could say mode equals, right? And just so I could see back, forward, new, and refresh. That's what I would want. Only these actually work in a very reliable way, which is not the way that the override in the page code behind works, unfortunately. So for example, back always looks like new. You never get back actually called, but you do here. Template 10 does it properly. And then the one other thing is this state, which we were referring to as the suspension state. And so this is the suspension state that's passed to me that allows me to, in this case, since I'm loading my view model, I would look to see if there's anything in that state, and I would populate my values from.
That's how you would know you're being resumed.
Yeah, so I would have something like if state.any, like that, and this is my key. That's if there is any that I'm being resumed from termination, and I need to repopulate my model. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there in any other case. I have two other view model overrides that are really interesting.
One other thing I just wanted to mention was you mentioned passing a key with session state. So the key thing to understand as well is if you're passing a key and you've been suspended, and then you're resumed and your session state comes back in, you obviously still have the information around. You've got to make sure you check to see that the ID is still present and have some other means of getting the information.
Yeah, so what you mean is right here, if the parameter is actually a key, then right below it, I would check to see if session state, which is a property of our view model, if session state contains the key of key, right, in this case.
Yep.
If it has it, then I would load it or whatever. But you're saying, but don't forget to have an else.
Yes.
If it's not there, then go get it the hard way. All right. Hard way. There you go. Which might mean you have to call out to your database or your web service or whatever and load it up again. So it's really handy if it's in, right? Then in this case, just use it. Otherwise, go get it the hard way. So that is important because in normal activation or normal application use, it's going to be in session state most of the time, but you never know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So always do defensive coding when you can.
Yeah, that's right. And so we have on navigated to, this is when we're navigating away from your view model to another page or another view model inside the same
So that's a past tense
navigation
operation.
state. It's a past tense. It's already navigated from, but now you're doing this one final tidy up sort of thing. And then, which is important because one of the properties, one of the arguments passed to you is whether or not the reason you're being navigated from is actually just for suspension.
Yes.
So if I am suspending, so then I would add logic to something like this. If suspension, right, if suspending, then I would say, and then I still have my page state right here. So I would say page state, right, and then let's see, page state. There we go. And then whatever it is, first name equals whatever my field value is. So I would basically be saving my properties into this so that when I resume, I can fill them in again. And so
yeah,
I've already.
That's a key concept that some people miss sometimes is when you're saving your page state, you're really saving a transitory state where somebody may be partway through entering in fields and you want to capture those partially entered values. So when you resume back, the form is as they left it.
That's right.
This is not the same as saving a record to a database because it's complete.
No.
That has its own persistence model. This is for saving transitory state.
It's almost like a draft. You know, the user's leaving, but you know that you're likely to come back. And so you want, another thing you might save is not just a value, but maybe even scroll position and things like that to give them a new place like that.
Well, I mean, that's a very key scenario. If you're navigating to a detail and you're going to come back to your list. So that's an example when you wouldn't be saving the state because of suspension. You'd be saving state because you might be navigating back to it.
That's right. The final override that you have is on navigating from. All right, so that tense is important.
Yes.
Because the navigation has not occurred yet, and it gives you the opportunity to say args.cancel equals true. And so in this case, let's pretend I'm looking at some of my business logic, and the user has a dirty record that they haven't saved, and I don't want them to lose that value. And so I prompt them to save, and I cancel the navigation. Right. So this is nice. So I can prevent the navigation even without having a reference back to the page. So this is something that's actually quite difficult to do if you don't have some sort of framework provided.
Yeah, and here's another concrete example, because I was recently working on a commercial application that wasn't built using template 10 from the ground up. And so we had to solve this particular problem where we were rendering a video. And that's a long-running process. And because you want to keep your application responsive and so on and so forth, you're not locking down the UI. So somebody is able to press the back button. If they're full screen, you've got the global back button and so on and so forth. So you can't stop people pressing it, but you have to be able to respond to it. So we had to create our own infrastructure to do this, to turn around and say, hey, you're encoding a video, it's got 3 minutes left. Do you want to abort the encoding, or do you want to proceed and cancel the encoding?
And I know we say this over and over again, but template 10 is just code that you would write otherwise. And so when you look at this, you might say to yourself, oh, I could do that. And you're right, you absolutely could. We've just done it for you. And so it gets you a long way before you have to start coding the boilerplate stuff that you just have to test and all these other things that we've done for you that way. So that's the navigation service. The big part of the navigation service is that you get one for free because of the bootstrapper. And that's how you move around inside the standard frame, inside XAML standard frame. It doesn't change the way navigation works, still works the same. It doesn't change the way suspend resume works, still works the same. It just wraps the logic you would have otherwise written so that you don't have to. It also provides this iNavigable mechanism inside your view models. That's the navigation service, Darren.
Sounds good. See you soon.